the 18th century scholar that was known as the Genius of Vilna. In his own words, here's what that scholar said, and this is a quote. He said, "The rule is that all that was, all that is, and all that will be until the end of time is included in the Torah from the first word to the last." Because it's in those first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, that mathematicians and statisticians were able to load them into the computer back in the 90s and run search algorithms called ELS, electronic skip sequences.
Right.
Or letter sequences. And what they found when they do that mathematically is beyond random, beyond chance. Statistically, what they're finding is meaningful information encoded in number underlying the letters of only these first 5 books. They tried it with other books and it doesn't work. So there's something very special about those first 5 books, a deeper meaning below the letters that we read on the page. Every ancient alphabet, bar none, has always had a number that represents the letter. The science of that is called gematria, and it's not numerology. Numerology is a loose subset that doesn't follow the rules. In the 2nd century, there was a book, the 32 Rabbinical Rules were laid out in the 2nd century, determining how gematria can be used as a science. And I've spent a lot of time with this. I've got the software, run the algorithms, and you can't fake this stuff. I mean, everything that has happened in the past is encoded into that document. They did the original. Are you familiar with this? Have you had guests talk about this? Okay, so
roughly, vaguely.
Everything from all the great wars are in there. The countries that entered the wars, the years they entered, who their leaders were, the year the war was over, what year the leaders. The assassination of Kennedy, election of Trump. everything is encoded, and the text says that it will be. Everything that was, is, or will be is until the end of time. Not the end of the world, but the end of time is encoded into that text. The end of time.
Into these texts.
Into the first 5 books. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
When do you think they were written?
Well, this is why the scrolls are so important. Because they were the oldest records that had not been edited that were ever discovered of these books. Okay, representations of all of the Old Testament, not complete, but representations of all of them, and you can see where the discrepancies are.
What is the I know we've talked about this a million times, but I can't remember, what is the consensus among scholars of when the Dead Sea Scrolls were originally composed?
I don't know if they
Can you find that, Steve?
If they have a consensus, the scrolls...
Or what is the narrative?
The scrolls pushed the dates back by 1,000 years.
Okay, so they say they were written between the 3rd and the 1st. Okay. Right, so during or after, they're Hellenistic. At the very earliest, they were Hellenistic. So 300 BC, roughly.
So there's a whole lot we can say about all of that, but I think what's important from all that, and it's another perspective.
Right.
It's another perspective. Why?
How
could all that information be encoded? And to understand that, I was a senior computer systems designer, and even that, I had not been taught about what it appears is happening in here. This is what's called a dynamic array. So we're used to talking about an array of information, linear information. This is a multidimensional. In the computer, you can do it multidimensional. But the thing about this array is every time an event occurs, the entire array rearranges itself to accommodate that event and create a new possible outcome. It's almost as if, in lay terms, it's almost as if we were given, we believe, except that we live in a quantum world, quantum possibilities, many potentials, and that we make the choices that become our reality. It's almost as if we were given a map of potentials, outcomes. So you query a say something like 2024 election Trump. So that's a query. And you put that in, and it will come back, and the array will show you like Trump's name, and it'll show you the 2024 election, and it'll show you assassination attempt. It'll show you the possibilities around that particular query. Doesn't predict what will happen.
Right.
It indicates consequences and outcomes. It's almost as if we were given a map of quantum possibilities so that we can query. But I want to just share the really good news that I've seen from this. During the Cold War, I queried, and I was studying this during the Cold War, right at the end of the Cold War. Cold War was over 89 and 90, and it was in the early 90s. It was the first time that Michael Drosnin wrote the book called The Bible Code. It was the first time with the Hebrew mathematicians. And if you query atomic holocaust, that only comes up twice in the code, and the years for both of those we've already passed. So it suggests that we are not, I'm not going to say you won't see a limited exchange. I think you may see a tactical nuke on the battlefield somewhere. But I don't think we're going to see mushroom clouds all over the horizon like they show in the movies. It showed 1983. 83 was the last year, according to the Torah codes, the Bible codes, that the word atomic holocaust comes up, and it says, this is called the Torah codes or the Bible codes. It's commonly the Bible codes, but it's actually the Torah that's being. The first 5 books of the Old Testament.
Who was the guy who first wrote about this?
Are you familiar with the Bible? I mean, I won't be redundant.
I'm not familiar with what. No, okay, I've never heard of this before.
Okay. Well, I apologize. Okay, so let's start over. 1990, mid 1990s, a man named Michael Drosnin.
Michael Drosnin, that's the name.
Wrote a book called The Bible Codes.
Right.
And it was based on the work of Eli. There's a statistical mathematician who had published in a peer-reviewed journal an article about what are called electronic letter sequences, ELS sequences. Mm-hmm. And so here's what put it on the map. In the Torah codes, it said that the prime minister, his name was Yitzhak Rabin, would be assassinated at a certain time on a certain date by a man with a very precise name. They took this information to Yitzhak Rabin and said, look, if you do this speech on this day, 3,000-year-old book says you're gonna be killed. So maybe you want to rethink. And he said, no, if it's in the Torah, it must be true. He went and gave his speech, and he was killed on the day, at the location, at the time of day, and the man's name was Amir, A-M-I-R, and that was all in the Torah codes. And that's what put it on the map. They said, how could this book have predicted that this was going to happen? So then the statisticians, they said, well, what if he hadn't? What if he had postponed? So they ran the query, that he talked on another day. And the Torah codes came back, and it said assassination delayed, indicating it still would have happened, but it would have happened at maybe another time.
Okay, can you explain to me again how exactly they run these codes?
I'm sorry, I apologize, because when you said you'd heard of it, I assumed that you would already.
I'm familiar with how numbers are associated with the language and the words.
Let's do this. This is so cool.
I wasn't familiar with how they decipher. Are they using a computer to put this in?
Let's do this. This is so cool.
Okay.
This goes back about 400 years. Rabbis have always said that there are hidden codes in the Torah. Mm-hmm. They didn't have computers. They tried to figure it out by hand, and it's said by candlelight and lantern lights, and it said that they went crazy trying to do this. So when computers came into vogue in the 90s, those same rabbis said, "Well, let's do this on a computer." So the idea, this is gematria. Every letter of every ancient alphabet has always had a mysterious number associated with it. We don't know where they came from. They never change, always consistent. If you the study of Kabbalah, People know this. They often use the numbers and letters interchangeably in Kabbalah or Kabbalah. So they took the Torah and converted the letters into their equivalent numeric representations and loaded that into the computers as an array.
Okay.
All right. And then you can tell the computers, beginning with a certain letter, you can do what's called a skip code. You can say, if a skip code is 10, you start with a letter, and then you go 10, and then 10 letters down, and then that's the next code, and then 10 letters down, and that's the next. And what you find is an entire word. So, for example, in the book of Genesis, the first T that you find, and I believe it's a skip code of 10, is O, skip code of 10 R, skip code of 10 H, and it actually says Torah. And they said, okay, well, what else is in there? So that's what makes you crazy doing it by hand. So what they did was a computer, and you can determine what it can be a skip code of 50 or a skip code. Actually, the Torah may be a skip code of 50. I may have just done that wrong. I didn't know we were going to talk about this, and I haven't done it for a while. You can determine the skip code, and what it will do, it will search horizontally, it'll search vertically, and it'll search at a diagonal.
Okay.
There you go, right? I was just you're reading my mind. So you can see how these skip codes work.
Okay.
The key is it has to be entered in Hebrew. You have to enter the query in Hebrew. And
wow.
Where the information, so like, for example, the Twin Towers was in there. And it said that the planes would hit the Twin Towers. Everything.
And how did they find that? They did this after the fact, obviously, right?
It doesn't predict. It shows relationships once you put them in there. So Harold Gans was a CIA analyst who wanted to debunk this. So he said, let me do my...
Harold Gans.
G-A-N-S. He said, let me do my experiment. And there was a very famous experiment that he did where they entered the name of, I believe it was 32 rabbis. And they said, let's see if these 32 rabbis are in there. Well, not only were they in there, their birth dates were in there, the date of their death was in there, the location where they lived in the world, their city was in there. It exceeded what the analysts thought. He was going to debunk it. Now he's one of the strongest supporters of what was happening. So it's controversial. A lot of people don't believe it. It's a mystery. How could these things happen? Well, this opens the door to another conversation that we can't have today. But the conversation is if we are living in a simulation. I think you've probably had guests on that have talked about virtual realities and us living in the simulation. Have you had a guest talk about that? If we are living in a virtual simulation, it makes sense that we would have a map of all the potentials within our simulation until the end of the cycle. And that's what is believed that the Torah codes were given to the people of the earth 3,000 years ago as a map of potentials. When we make a choice, these are what you can expect as the outcome until the end, not the end of the world, but the end of time. The end of time is the end of the cycle. And then we begin a new cycle.